India's international engagement, in a way, under Atalji's tenure, could be described as a master class in soft power. And I am quoting Atalji. अब इस बात पर बल दिया जा रहा है कि हमारी संस्कृति एक कॉम्पोजिट कल्चर है। क्या मतलब है कॉम्पोजिट कल्चर का? कौन सा देश है जिसका कॉम्पोजिट कल्चर नहीं है? क्या अमेरिका वाले यह ढोल पीटते हैं कि हमारा कॉम्पोजिट कल्चर है? ब्रिटेन का कल्चर क्या है? कल्चर एक्सक्लूसिव नहीं होता। एक भूखंड पर सैकड़ों साल से रहते रहते, सहते सहते, सुख दुख को बांटते बांटते, जय और पराजय की स्मृति अंतःकरण में संजोते संजोते, बाहर के प्रभाव को हजम करते तथा एक दूसरे के अंतर्विरोध को सामंजस्य में बदलते हुए जो लोग एक राष्ट्र के रूप में उभरते हैं, उन्हें जोड़ने वाली कड़ी संस्कृति होती है, मात्र उपासना पद्धति नहीं होती। In a distinctively telling comment, Chagla further says that foreign policy has many facets, but if I were to select one which stands out in all Vajpayee's utterances and actions, is a genuine belief in good neighborliness. I mean, when I say soft power, it is basically about the idea of India. And Atalji says that all my courage came from my philosophy, my traditions. The individual in India has always been given the pivotal place in our religious and philosophical traditions. Our scriptures and our epics have all along met one central point: the cosmos and the creation hinge on the individual and his fulfillment.
Mitra, namaskar. We are now ready to begin the program, and may I request everyone to please settle down and put your mobile phones on silent mode. We will start with a small video clip on Shri Atal Bihari Vajpayee.
Shri Atal Bihari Vajpayee, a man of the masses, firm in his political convictions. Shri Vajpayee was born in the family of a humble school teacher. His rise in public life is a tribute to both his political acumen and Indian democracy. His first brush with nationalist politics was in his student days when he joined the Quit India movement of 1942. A student of political science and law, it was in college that he developed a keen interest in foreign affairs. Atalji graduated from Victoria College of Gwalior. Later, he obtained a master's degree in political science. He had many literary, artistic and scientific achievements to his name. Many of his books were published, among which 4 Decades in Parliament 1957 to 95, New Dimensions of India's Foreign Policy, etc. are prominent. He had embarked upon a journalist's career, which was cut short in 1951. Shri Atal Bihari Vajpayee was the Prime Minister of the country from 16 to 31st March 1996 and then from 19th March 1998 to 13th May 2004. His tenure as a Prime Minister was so glorious that even after a decade, it is not only remembered but also implemented. There have been very few Prime Ministers who have left such a positive impact on society. Shri Vajpayee ji was awarded Padma Vibhushan in 1992. In 2015, he was decorated with the title of India's highest civilian honour, Bharat Ratna. Remembering Shri Atal Bihari Vajpayee, a leader, poet and visionary.
Thank you. May I request our distinguished speaker, Shri Vinay Sahasrabuddhe, and the chair for today's event, Dr. Vidya Yeravdekar, to please come on stage. A big round of applause, please. Dr. Raghunath Mashelkar, President PIC, Dr. Vijay Kelkar, Vice President, our trustees, members and friends. India's soft power and the legacy of Prime Minister Shri Atal Bihari Vajpayee is the fascinating topic of today's lecture, which will be delivered indeed by a fascinating person who was the former President of the Indian Council for Cultural Relations, Dr. Vinay Sahasrabuddhe. The Indian civilization is well known as the birthplace of a number of great religions: Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, Jainism, as the birthplace of yoga, Ayurveda, chess, the invention of zero, and timeless philosophical ideas and concepts. We are aware of the spread of Buddhism and Hinduism in ancient India, from the borders of Afghanistan to China and East Asia all the way to Japan. In fact, one of the latest books on the subject today is by the historian William Dalrymple. The book is The Golden Road: How Ancient India Transformed the World. Our distinguished speaker today, Dr. Vinay Sahasrabuddhe, is a friend of the PIC and a previous speaker at our institution. Well known as the former president of ICCR, he is a member of the National Executive of the BJP and has served as the former National Vice President of the BJP. From 2016 to 2022, he was a member of the Rajya Sabha and chairman of the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Education, Women, Children, and Youth and Sports. He is presently chairman of the State Cultural Policy Implementation Committee and also heads the Finance Committee of the Prime Minister's Museum and Library, New Delhi. Between 2012 and 2015, he was the Vice President of the famous Asiatic Society of Mumbai. Born in Nashik, Dr. Sahasrabuddhe initially studied in Nashik and later in Pune at the Garware and SP colleges. A postgraduate in English literature, he earned his PhD from Mumbai University. He had brief stints in journalism and CorpCom and was the founder-director of the well-known Rambhau Malgi Prabodhini, established in Mumbai to build the capacities of elected representatives and politicians. He continues to be the vice chairman of the Prabodhini. The chair for today's event, Dr. Vidya Yeravdekar, is Pro-Chancellor at Symbiosis International University, Principal Director Symbiosis, and a trustee and founder member of Pune International Centre. She holds a postgraduate degree in medicine, a degree in law, and a PhD in internationalization of higher education in India. Dr. Vidya has been instrumental in bringing in innovative approaches to promote internationalization of higher education in India. She has made significant contributions in this domain as a member of the University Grants Commission for 2 terms and the Central Advisory Board of Education under the Ministry of Education, ICCR, and the Ministry of External Affairs. Dr. Vidya, we know the story of how Symbiosis was founded by Dada S.B. Muzumdar, your illustrious father. The story of how, as a professor of botany, he saw the suffering of a Mauritian student in the hostel of Ferguson College, and from there on, Symbiosis went on to grow into a great institution. It has a number of campuses within and outside India, and indeed is one of the shining symbols of India's soft power. Before handing over the floor to Dr. Vidya, I would like to mention that this 5-part series on Shri Atal Bihari Vajpayee, one of India's most beloved Prime Ministers, was conceived by our Vice President Dr. Vijay Kelkar as Pune International Centre's tribute to Shri Vajpayee in his birth centenary year. This series has explored Shri Vajpayee's legacy through his politics and personality, his approach to diplomacy, his idea of India as a nation, his sensitivity as a poet, his initiatives to promote economic reforms, and Dr. Mashelkar has been speaking from time to time on his promotion of science and technology. He will say a few words in his concluding remarks too. May I now request Dr. Vidya to please say a few.
So, Honorable Shri Vinay Sahasrabuddhe ji, with whom I have had the chance to be associated with when I was the member of the General Assembly of ICCR and the governing board of ICCR, sir. So I've seen your work closely. Honorable Dr. Mashelkar, sir, Dr. Vijay Kerkar, Dr. Supnekar, Amitav, sir, and all the dignitaries, my dear friend, Professor Anade, and others. Thank you very much for requesting me to chair this session. I don't know the reason why, maybe just because I'm a trustee of PIC I'm here, but the topic is very close to my heart, sir, because I think that's something that we practice almost every day at Symbiosis. One of my very popular authors, Joseph Nye from Harvard University, in fact popularized the term soft power. And many a times you wonder what this soft power is. And nowadays it's spoken so much about, not just by Indians and India as a country, but several other countries, and also criticize those countries who use hard power. And therefore India is known for its soft power, and this topic is so relevant, especially when we're doing a lecture series of Shri Atal Bihari ji. So when Joseph Nye spoke about soft power or made it popular, he looked at what soft power is, and he also has defined what soft power is. But there are people who also criticize the word soft power. One of them is another scientist in international education, a very senior lady called Professor Jane Knight from Toronto, Canada. And she says the word power means coercion. It's hard. It's something that you do to, in your self-interest. So how can power be soft? And therefore, when she talks about, she's a great author on international education, and when she talks about soft power and criticizes it, because she says that, when you talk about soft power and use education as a tool of soft power, that's not right. In fact, the term that she uses is knowledge diplomacy. So there have been these kind of debates on what soft power is and what it is not. But I think for all of us, and specifically me coming from the education sector, education and healthcare, both of which I represent, being a medical doctor myself and a practicing academic, these are two very important pillars of soft power that our country can honestly boast of. And of course, there are several others, like what we did at ICCR, sir, the culture and heritage of India, the yoga that we are now promoting thanks to our Honorable Prime Minister, and of course, health and education, as I said. And then you look at the Indian diaspora all around. I was one a few years ago, maybe 20 years back. And when we were abroad, we used to talk about the Indian culture, our value systems, we practiced our festivals, much more than probably what we did in India. And that's the way we spread the Indian culture and heritage to other countries. Again, this was a soft power through Indian diaspora. When you talk about education, when we look at foreign students who come here, get educated and go back, that's the soft power tool that India has been using. And I hope that the number of foreign students, which are just at 50,000 today, move on to becoming 200,000 or maybe even more. And I know that Vinay ji is very, very passionate about this subject, and he may cover it in his speech, and we've been working towards it and seeing how many more foreign students should come to India. And does India really look at foreign students through a commercial angle, like the way America or Australia looks at? Never. India looks at the foreign students coming to us so that they get educated, go back to their countries and strengthen relations between their countries and ours. And I would also like to give one example of President Karzai, the former president of Afghanistan, who studied in Shimla. And I remember having invited him to Symbiosis once. And without the MEA, honestly, I knew the Afghanistan ambassador in Delhi, and I just told him, Mr. Ambassador Abdali, can we get the president here? And he said, why not? Because there were 5,000 Afghanistan students here in the city of Pune, unfortunately not so many now. And President Karzai came here, and that was only because of the fact that he was educated in India. He felt so much for India, and he felt so much for those Afghanistan students who studied in our country, because he believed that maybe some might just become what he became after being educated from here. So I think education plays a very, very important role. And the second is, of course, healthcare, because that's something that really touches the hearts and minds and bodies of several people. And whether it's the Kerala spas that attract most European and German people to, take their Ayurvedic treatments in Kerala, or whether it's a hospital like Just Lok Hospital, which attracts a lot of West Asian and Arabs for treatment even today, or someone like us, someone like me who went as a medical doctor to the Sultanate of Oman, practiced medicine. And you'd be surprised to know that when there was a huge OPD of maybe more than 500 patients, especially when I practiced obstetrics and gynecology. And opposite my OPD used to be a lady who was from Egypt, an Egyptian doctor. And she could speak fluent Arabic. Even I can speak now, but at that time I could not as much as she did. And I used to ask those women who came to me saying that, why don't you go to her, instead of coming to me? And they would say, la la la, Indian tabiba, So they would say, no, the Indian doctors, and especially women Indian doctors, they really trust the most. So this is the kind of soft power through medicine that we have spread, and leave alone the others like yoga and technology that has played such a major role, and so on and so forth. I won't dwell into the subject of India's soft power because we have a great speaker with us. But as regards Atalji, unfortunately, I never had the opportunity to meet him, and I really feel so miserable about it now that we meet so many. It's so easy to meet so many politicians and statesmen. It wasn't really easy during those days, but definitely I saw the movie because I couldn't meet him. Atal, I have read so much about him, and his poetry that he used was a tool of soft power. His speeches, to create such a strong Indian cultural identity through his speeches, through his poetry, or of course the bus ride that has become so popular between India and Pakistan. I think he was one person who used soft power not as much as others. I mean, he used it the most, I would say, through his beautiful speeches, his poetry, his actions, his foreign policy, which spoke about India and its neighborhood first. I mean, whether it was ASEAN and countries closer to us, the kind of relations that he developed with them was again one more tool of soft power that he used. So this is a subject that I've read so much and speak about, but I would not, because we have a great speaker here, as I said, and I will hand over the mic to Vinayji. If there's any other intervention, Abhay, I am not aware, but certainly this is something that will be a great takeaway for all of us today, and to know more about Atalji's way of, using his soft power for the country would be something of great honor that we will get to listen to from another honorable speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yeravdekar. I invite Dr. Sahasrabuddhe to deliver the lecture. Thank you.
पुणे आंतरराष्ट्रीय केंद्र किंवा पुणे इंटरनॅशनल सेंटरच्या या व्याख्यानमालेसाठी उपस्थित डॉक्टर रघुनाथ माशेलकर सर, डॉक्टर विजय केळकर सर, डॉक्टर अजित रानडे सर, अभय वैद्यजी, या सत्राची अध्यक्षता करत असलेल्या डॉक्टर विद्या येरवडेकर, पुणे शहरातील अनेक प्रतिष्ठित मान्यवर, बंधू आणि भगिनींनो, मला माहिती आहे की या संस्थेच्या या भाषण मालिकेचा नियम म्हणा किंवा एक संकेत म्हणा की हे भाषण इंग्रजीतून व्हायला हवं आणि मी इंग्रजीतूनच बोलणार आहे. परंतु पुण्याच्या सारख्या शहरामध्ये आणि अटलजींच्याबद्दल बोलताना स्वभाषा हा एक विषय स्वाभाविकरित्या येतोच येतो. कारण ज्या पंतप्रधानांनी प्रथमच हिंदीचा झेंडा युनायटेड नेशन्समध्ये संयुक्त राष्ट्रसंघात फडकवला, त्यांच्या जन्मशताब्दीच्या प्रसंगी आपण भाषण करताना माय मराठीच्या बद्दलची आपली भावना व्यक्त करताना मराठीतून थोडंसं बोललंच पाहिजे, म्हणून मी सुरुवात मराठीतून केली आहे. आय विल बी नाव स्विचिंग ओव्हर टू इंग्लिश. इट इज इंडीड ए प्राऊड प्रिव्हिलेज and it's a matter of great honor to be here at this Pune International Centre, and that too delivering an oration in memory of Atal Bihari Vajpayee, one of the most beloved Prime Ministers of India. and that too when we are celebrating his birth centenary. Pune has been one of my favorite cities, and I had spent my initial college days in this beautiful city. It was here that I had the opportunity of offering satyagraha against the draconian rule of emergency in 1975, and then as a reward spent some 45 days, not so much, behind the bars as well in Yeravdekar. So naturally I have very fond memories of Pune, and in Pune, when I am invited to deliver a lecture, that too by such a distinguished organization, it is truly a great honor. And let me start with thanking the Pune International Centre. Friends, Atal Bihari Vajpayee was one of the most popular Prime Ministers of India. He was a man of many parts, a poet, a journalist, a great orator, a parliamentarian committed to democratic values, and above all, a leader with exceptional qualities who successfully rose from a darling of the classes to become a man of the masses. India's international engagement, in a way, under Atalji's tenure, could be described as a master class in soft power. Vajpayee's legacy demonstrates that a nation's influence extends far beyond military or economic strength. India, under his leadership, leveraged its rich culture, democratic values, and peace and harmony-centric foreign policy to enhance its global stature. At the same time, through his historic decision to go for nuclear tests, he gave a message that its own national interests will always be paramount for India. He was a thinker leader, and in that sense also an embodiment of India's soft power. It would not be an exaggeration to say that his life, his mission, his views, his vision, everything mirrors the very idea of India. During his tenures, both as foreign minister as well as prime minister, as also during over 5 decades long public life, Vajpayee reflected elaborately on several philosophical tenets of India's soft power, as also tried to promote the practical manifestations of the same in multiple ways. When one reviews Atalji's contribution in the context of soft power, we also have to take into account his brief but remarkable tenure as India's foreign minister during the Janata Party rule. One of the most erudite predecessors of Atalji and a renowned jurist, Muhammad Karim Chagla, had summed up Atalji's contribution in a very significant comment. In his foreword to a compilation of Atalji's speeches, Chagla ji has very elaborately mentioned, and now I quote Muhammad Karim Chagla. Chagla ji says, he was, that is Atalji, for himself, he has won for himself a place as the outstanding spokesman of the third world, the world that stands for peace, for the end of all colonialism, and particularly in the new phase of economic aggressions aimed at weak and poor countries in Asia and Africa against that monstrous evil of apartheid in South Africa and Rhodesia, and against economic inequalities between the poor and the rich in international relations. He indeed represents the conscience of the world, not the world of the heartless affluent, not the world of the power-hungry countries, but the world which believes in fair play and just distribution of human resources between all those who provide the resources and those who make their millions by using them and dumping their production on countries too weak and too poor to withstand these economic onslaughts. I think this very clearly sums up how Atalji navigated through various economic, diplomatic and other forces. In a distinctively telling comment, Chagla further says that foreign policy has many facets, but if I were to select one which stands out in all Vajpayee's utterances and actions, is a genuine belief in good neighborliness. And I had also come across a very beautiful book, the preface of which was written by Jagat Mehta, who was the Foreign Secretary during Atalji's time. And he has also mentioned that Atalji's tenure was one of the happiest period for India's good neighborly relations, something which is very remarkable. A firm believer of the basic tenets of Indian philosophy, Atalji was a strong votary of, to use his own words, friendship with all, dominance over none. I think this should sum up how Atalji contributed. This was, in a way, his definition of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. And now I quote what Atalji had said. What came to pass took many friends abroad by surprise, but to me, the great political courage shown by the people came from our ethos and tradition. I mean, when I say soft power, it is basically about the idea of India. And Atalji says that all my courage came from my philosophy, my traditions. The individual in India has always been given the pivotal place in our religious and philosophical traditions. Our scriptures and our epics have all along made one central point: the cosmos and the creation hinge on the individual and his fulfillment. We have accepted all along that divinity may have many forms. Ekam sat vipra bahuda vadanti, as we say. Everyone in India is therefore free to pursue his own path to salvation, irrespective of birth or belief. At the same time, however, our seers, in an unbroken line from ancient Vedic times to present, have taught us compassion towards all. Let's start with once the most debated issue of secularism. For Atalji, the very essence of the idea of India, as I said, was ekam sat vipra bahuda vadanti. And he had said in his musings at the end of 2002, when he had spent some days in Goa, as few of you might be remembering, in 2002 at the UNGA, he said that equal respect to all religions is not just a constitutional obligation, but is the signature tune of India's culture and civilization. But Atalji, although a great visionary and idealist, was also pragmatist and minced no words when truth was required to be told as candidly as needed. In 1998, in an interview with Javed Akhtar, and this is very famous and available on the internet as well, in a program called Face Off, Vajpayee clearly mentioned that India is secular because Hindus are in majority here. Again, in September 2000, addressing Asia Society in New York, Atalji clearly said, and now I am quoting Atalji, see how clear-headedly he has dealt with this. I'm quoting Atalji, I quote, "The protagonists of terror campaign are known to the world. The proliferation of practitioners of medieval religious extremism in our neighborhood is only one of the factors that have contributed to cross-border terrorism. But they have provided convenient cloak to disguise the aggression in our civil society, the cloak of jihad. This is nothing but an attempt by those who have adopted cross-border terrorism as an instrument of state policy to disown responsibility for their terrible crimes against humanity. We reject," Atalji says, "we reject and we call upon the international community to reject attempts to cloak cross-border terrorism as jihad." Very clear. Atalji also had very understandable reservations about needless drum beating about what they call as composite culture. And what now I am quoting is from his Hindi speeches, and therefore to keep with the beauty of Hindi language, and he was a master of that as we know, let me also here use Hindi. And I am quoting Atalji. अब इस बात पर बल दिया जा रहा है कि हमारी संस्कृति एक कॉम्पोजिट कल्चर है। क्या मतलब है कॉम्पोजिट कल्चर का? कौन सा देश है जिसका कॉम्पोजिट कल्चर नहीं है? क्या अमेरिका वाले यह ढोल पीटते हैं कि हमारा कॉम्पोजिट कल्चर है? ब्रिटेन का कल्चर क्या है? कल्चर एक्सक्लूसिव नहीं होता। एक भूखंड पर सैकड़ों साल से रहते रहते, सहते सहते, सुख दुख को बांटते बांटते, जय और पराजय की स्मृति अंतःकरण में संजोते संजोते, बाहर के प्रभाव को हजम करते तथा एक दूसरे के अंतर्विरोध को सामंजस्य में बदलते हुए जो लोग एक राष्ट्र के रूप में उभरते हैं, उन्हें जोड़ने वाली कड़ी संस्कृति होती है, मात्र उपासना पद्धति नहीं होती। I think again very clear-headed about it. Current dispensation at the center under the leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, since we are talking about legacy, I must mention over here, also resonates that this when Prime Minister himself emphasizes on Ek Bharat Shrestha Bharat. Atalji was a strong votary of unity and diversity. Again, in his musings in Goa in 2002, he had mentioned that from time to time, the theme of unity and diversity provokes intense debate, even controversies. I wish to comment on two distinct voices which have become louder after the Gujarat elections. On the one hand, secularism is being pitted against Hindutva under the belief that the two are antithetical to one another. This is incorrect and untenable. Secularism is a concept of the state, enjoining upon it the duty to show respect for all faiths and to practice no discrimination among citizens on the basis of their beliefs. In this sense, India has been secular since the beginning of her known history. We chose to remain wedded to secularism even when Pakistan was carved out on the basis of the spurious and communal two-nation theory. This could not have been possible if the majority of Indians were not secular, unquote. Let's now also deal with another facet of Indian philosophy, which is about worshipping the nature. Because this is also a part of India's soft power, as I understand, and not talking about the conquest of nature, but about confluence with Mother Nature. The National Wildlife Action Plan, introduced during the Vajpayee era, something very remarkable. Along with it, the National Wildlife Strategy, a 10-point, one-page document, was also released by the Prime Minister's office. During that time, most national parks and wildlife sanctuaries still lacked buffer areas, and it is to the credit of Atalji that he created. Today we are talking about man-animal conflict, and these buffer areas definitely play an important role, and at the basis of which is our idea of live and let others live, including the other animals as well, not just human beings. All this reflects Atalji's conviction about one of the basic tenets of Indian culture, which again is a facet of India's soft power, which is confluence with Mother Nature. And when it comes to his legacy, let's understand that what he said at the Convention of Climate Change in no uncertain terms. I need not go elaborately, but what I wanted to mention over here is that when it comes to climate change and things like that, even today we are struggling and we are trying to convince the developed countries not to penalize the developing countries for their sins. And this was also mentioned by Atalji when he addressed. So the legacy continues. And when we discuss India's soft power and Atal Bihari Vajpayee, we must also reflect upon the question of India's uniqueness in the context of soft power. Atalji had famously said that India is not just a piece of land. And in his very lucid language, in Hindi he mentions, भारत कोई भूमि का टुकड़ा नहीं है, यह जीता जागता राष्ट्र पुरुष है। ये वंदन की धरती है, ये अभिनंदन की भूमि है, ये अर्पण की भूमि है, ये तर्पण की भूमि है। इसकी नदी नदी हमारे लिए गंगा है, इसका कंकर कंकर हमारे लिए शंकर है। हम जिएंगे तो इस भारत के लिए और मरेंगे तो इस भारत के लिए, और मरने के बाद भी गंगा जल में बहती हुई हमारी अस्थियों को कोई कान लगाकर सुनेगा तो एक ही आवाज आएगी, भारत माता की जय। This was his patriotism, this was his intense love for motherland. In his approach, it is this approach that Atalji in a way explains cultural nationalism. I mean, it is this approach which helps us understand his idea of cultural nationalism, the most distinguishing factor that puts Atalji and the BJP on a totally different pedestal. One of Prime Minister Vajpayee's most enduring contributions to India's soft power was his promotion of Hindi and Indian culture on the world stage. His choice to deliver a speech in Hindi at the United Nations General Assembly in 1977 and later as PM in 1998. Remember, he was the first foreign minister to speak in Hindi and the first prime minister also to speak in Hindi at the United Nations. Vajpayee believed that India's identity was rooted in its diversity and history, and this acknowledgement could bridge cultural gaps. Promoting Hindi internationally became part of the broader effort to project India's linguistic and cultural heritage in the era of globalization. Vajpayee is on the record having once said that if Chinese leader, despite knowing Hindi, despite knowing English, insist on speaking in Mandarin, why should we Indians not speak in either Hindi or any other Indian language? In fact, he also had said in a speech, he was here in Pune, I think, and when he delivered a speech at the occasion of 50 years of Geet Ramayan of Sudhir Phadke. He was very fond of Marathi songs and especially Geet Ramayan. And he said, tomorrow if a Marathi person becomes foreign minister, I would certainly support the idea of he speaking in Marathi at the United Nations. So that was his approach, which was very, very democratic. And in a way, this reflects the legacy of Mahatma Gandhi and Lokmanya Tilak as well. Tilak, in one of the Congress sessions, had emphasized that if you are at difficulty in speaking in Hindi or English, speak in your mother tongues. And today, again, when we talk about legacy, this government, the Modi government, is emphasizing on education in mother tongues, which is so very critical, because if we do not revere our motherland and also our mother tongue, nobody else is going to do that. And therefore, it is our responsibility. Let me cite two interesting examples here. The first one is about Hindi and the second one about Indian music. Because मैं ये उदाहरण इसलिए दे रहा हूँ कि हमने अपनी संस्कृति के बारे में, अपनी धरोहर के बारे में, अपनी विरासत के बारे में, और भाषा हमारी विरासत का एक अभिन्न अंग है, किस पद्धति की भूमिका रखनी चाहिए। ICCR के काम की वजह से मैं एक बार मॉस्को गया था, तो जहाँ जहाँ हम जाते हैं, जो भारतीय ज्ञान परंपरा के विषय वहाँ पर पढ़ाए जाते हैं, उन अध्यक्षों के साथ, हेड्स ऑफ डिपार्टमेंट्स के साथ नॉर्मली वी मेड ए प्रैक्टिस टू इंटरैक्ट विथ। तो मॉस्को यूनिवर्सिटी में हिंदी पढ़ाने की लंबी परंपरा है, सोवियत के ज़माने से वहाँ पर हिंदी पढ़ाई जाती है। तो एक 70 वर्षीय प्रोफेसर महिला जब मिलने के लिए आई, तब उन्होंने कहा कि मुझे 2 ऑब्जर्वेशंस आपके साथ शेयर करने हैं। पहली बात यह है कि आप कृपया मेरी ओर से आपके प्रधानमंत्री जी को धन्यवाद दीजिए। मैंने कहा मैं तो दूंगा, मगर कोई खास वजह है? तो बोले वजह यह है कि वो यहाँ आकर भी हिंदी में बोलते हैं। आपके अब तक के प्रधानमंत्री कोई यहाँ आकर हिंदी में नहीं बोलते थे। उसका मेरे लिए एक लाभ ये हुआ कि हिंदी से रूसी में अनुवाद करने वाले मेरे जैसे व्यक्ति को काम मिला। अब तक ये काम अंग्रेजी से रूसी में अनुवाद करने वाले व्यक्ति को दिया जाता था। दैट इज़ द इम्पॉर्टेंस ऑफ स्पीकिंग इन आवर ओन लैंग्वेजेस। दूसरा उसने कहा, वो भी हमारे लिए चिंतनीय है, कि मगर मेरी एक कंप्लेंट है कि जो हिंदी मैं पढ़ाती हूँ वो आपके देश में बोली नहीं जाती। मैंने कहा ऐसा कैसे हो सकता है? तो बोले मैं उदाहरण देकर बताती हूँ कि आप अंग्रेजी में जिसे प्राइस राइज कहते हैं, उसका भाषांतर अनुवाद होता है महंगाई। मगर अंग्रेजी में जिसे, और इतने बड़े अर्थशास्त्री यहाँ बैठे हैं, अंग्रेजी में जिसे इन्फ्लेशन कहते हैं, उसका हिंदी में अनुवाद होता है मुद्रास्फीति। मगर मुद्रास्फीति ये शब्द आपके लोगों को पता ही नहीं है। मैं उसकी बात को मानने के सिवा मेरे पास और कोई चारा नहीं था। और इसलिए हमारी आइडेंटिटी यानी क्या होती है? हमारी लैंग्वेज हमारी आइडेंटिटी है, हमारा संगीत हमारी आइडेंटिटी है, हमारे नृत्य प्रकार हमारी आइडेंटिटी है, हमारे स्क्रिप्चर्स हमारी आइडेंटिटी है। ICCR के समय काम करते समय, और विद्या जी को पता है कि हमने भारत के संगीतकारों का एक प्रतिनिधिमंडल हमारे उस समय के सिविल एविएशन मंत्री ज्योतिरादित्य सिंधिया जी को हम मिलने के लिए ले गए। हमारी डिमांड थी कि भारतीय हवाई यात्रा कंपनियों ने, विमान कंपनियों ने अपने केबिन म्यूज़िक में भारतीय संगीत ही बजाना चाहिए, उसका आग्रह रखना चाहिए। और हवाई अड्डे पर भी जो म्यूज़िक बजाया जाता है, चाहे लिफ्ट्स में हो, चाहे अन्य जगह हो, वो भी भारतीय संगीत होना चाहिए। उनको सुझाव पसंद आया। उन्होंने कहा ये कोई कंपलसरी तो नहीं किया जा सकता, हमारी भी वो डिमांड नहीं थी, मगर एक एडवाइजरी हम इशू करते हैं। और उन्होंने एडवाइजरी तत्काल 2 दिन में इशू भी की। दुर्भाग्य ऐसा है कि हमारे इस प्रस्ताव की आलोचना देश के प्रमुख समाचार पत्रों ने एडिटोरियल लिखकर की और उन्होंने कहा कि देखिए कैसी संकीर्णता है। वी वर अघास्ट। केवल देश के नहीं, इस प्रदेश के भी कुछ प्रमुख समाचार पत्रों में एडिटोरियली इस भूमिका को क्रिटिसाइज किया, ये कहते हुए कि व्हाट इज इंडियन म्यूजिक आफ्टर ऑल। सो दिस इज काइंड ऑफ अप्रोच, I would say a wokeism, I mean an approach that reflects wokeism that unfortunately has hampered the further cultivation of Indian culture and basically taking it to the younger generation, which is very required. भाषाओं के विषय में अटल जी ने ये भी कहा है, जिसको भी मैं आपके सम्मुख जरूर लाना चाहूँगा, कि कैसे भाषा के विषय में हमारा अप्रोच होना चाहिए। एंड अगेन आई एम कोटिंग अटल जी, जनता का राज जनता की भाषा में चले, यह बहुत आवश्यक है। लेकिन और आज के ज़माने में, और जब हम कुछ ही दिनों में चुनाव का सामना करने वाले हैं, वोटिंग करने वाले हैं, आई थिंक दीज आर द वर्ड्स विच शुड रिंग इन आवर ईयर्स। अटल जी सेज, लेकिन भाषा के प्रति, अपने क्षेत्र के प्रति, अपनी उपासना पद्धति के प्रति, अपनी जाति के प्रति हमारी निष्ठा इतनी प्रबल नहीं होनी चाहिए कि सारे भारत के प्रति निष्ठा उसे गलत रूप से प्रभावित हो जाए। I believe the message is loud and clear. Prime Minister Vajpayee has also reflected upon the innate strength of Indian epics like Ramayana and Mahabharata. And here also, I was pleasantly surprised to see that Atal ji has not just reflected on Ramayana and Mahabharata at his times, but today also, when we organize Ramayana festivals in ICCR, we come across similar experiences. But before I dwell upon that, let me quote what Atal ji says. जहाँ परिस्थितियों के परिवर्तन के कारण इस्लाम का पदार्पण हुआ, वहाँ भी प्राचीन संस्कृति के एक अनमोल अंग के रूप में रामायण जाना जाता है। बर्मा की राजधानी रंगून में मुझे एक सांस्कृतिक कार्यक्रम देखने का अवसर मिला, जिसमें उन्होंने राम कथा के उस भाग को प्रस्तुत किया था जहाँ सोने का मृग सीता का मन मोह कर चला गया और राम को पत्नी से हाथ धोना पड़ा। बर्मी भारतीय नहीं है, किंतु बर्मा के लोकमानस में रामायण की छाप है। इंडोनेशिया में 1 महीने तक रामायण का अभिनय होता है। रामायण वहाँ की सांस्कृतिक चेतना का अभिन्न अंग है। आईसीसीआर में जब हम रामायण महोत्सव करते हैं, तब एक बार हमने ब्रुनई के प्रतिनिधिमंडल को निमंत्रण भेजा। बाद में चर्चा चली दफ्तर में कि ब्रुनई तो 100% इस्लाम के अनुयायियों का देश है, अनलाइक इंडोनेशिया एंड मलेशिया, so whether they would be able to send a cultural delegation. But happily they sent, and they performed very well and presented a story of Ramayana. After the presentation, when some of us were having a cup of tea, somebody said we were apprehensive whether you would send a troop or not. Understanding what exactly the person was hinting at, the leader of the cultural troop told me that told us, I mean, so many of us were there, you are making a mistake. We have changed our religion, not our culture. मैं मानता हूँ कि अटल जी की भावना भी यही थी। Vajpayee is also made strategic use of Indian diaspora, recognizing the Indian community abroad as cultural ambassadors. The government expanded outreach efforts to Indian communities worldwide, encouraging them to maintain ties with their heritage. This approach helped establish Indian art, cuisine, and traditions in countries far beyond India's borders, fostering a global appreciation for Indian culture and strengthening diplomatic relations. His policies supported annual events celebrating India's cultural heritage, and as we know, केवल कल्चरल हेरिटेज के बारे में ही नहीं, तो बाद में प्रवासी भारतीय दिवस भी स्थापित हुआ, विच वी ऑब्जर्व ऑन 9th January एवरी ईयर। और ये भी मैं मानता हूँ कि अटल जी की एक बहुत बड़ी देन है कि हमने इस पद्धति से एक प्रवासी भारतीय दिवस मनाने की एक परंपरा, एक इंस्टीट्यूशन निर्माण की। बट rapidly also mention over here that Vajpayee was strong votary of evolving a cultural commonwealth. In 1991, in his speech at the occasion of celebration of Dr. Baba Saheb Ambedkar's birth centenary, Atal ji made a very elaborate comment on this, and I am now quoting Atal ji. बहनों और भाइयों, हम सब जानते हैं कि किसी विदेशी ने हमें परास्त नहीं किया, हम आपस की फूट का शिकार होकर अपने हाथों से अपनी तलवार लेकर अपने ही देश को जीतकर औरों को समर्पित करने के गुनहगार बने, दोषी बने। पर जो स्वाधीनता मिली है उसे अगर हमें अमर बनाना है, व्यक्ति की स्वतंत्रता पर आधारित लोकतंत्र को हमें अखंड रखना है, डॉक्टर अंबेडकर भारतीय संस्कृति की एकता के बड़े अटूट समर्थक थे। देश में अनेक भाषाएं हैं, अनेक उपासना पद्धतियां हैं, मगर देश की मिट्टी से निकली हुई संस्कृति एक है, अभिन्न है। आप उपासना पद्धति बदल सकते हैं, संस्कृति नहीं बदल सकते। व्हाट रेजोनेट्स व्हाट द ब्रुनेई डेलीगेशन सेड। और यह संस्कृति केवल भारत तक सीमित नहीं है। रिमेंबर, इस संस्कृति का संदेश लेकर हमारे उपदेशक दुनिया के अनेक देशों में गए और पूरे दक्षिण एशिया में फैल गए। मुझे याद है डॉक्टर अंबेडकर ने कहा था, भारत को एक कल्चरल कॉमनवेल्थ बनाना चाहिए। दक्षिण पूर्व एशियाई देशों में जहाँ जहाँ भारतीय संस्कृति गई है, जहाँ जहाँ भगवान बुद्ध का संदेश गया है, जहाँ जहाँ रामायण गई है, उन सब देशों को जोड़ना चाहिए, एक सांस्कृतिक संगठन के अंतर्गत उन्हें लाना चाहिए। किसी सरकार ने इस पर काम नहीं किया है। अगर आपने और भारत के मतदाताओं ने मौका दिया, डॉक्टर अंबेडकर के इस सपने को साकार करने का हम जरूर प्रयत्न करें। आई बिलीव दिस इज एन एजेंडा फॉर द करंट डिस्पेंसेशन टू क्रिएट ए कल्चरल कॉमनवेल्थ एज वेल। Prime Minister Vajpayee's economic reforms were a continuation of the liberalization policies begun in the early 1990s. But he intensified these efforts by prioritizing foreign investment, because this also has some close connection with our soft power. Because soft power is also about how the world perceives India. And I believe efforts like the great leaders, for example, Atal Bihari Vajpayee or several others as well, has always been to help the global community understand, which otherwise is a very difficult to understand, civilization, culture or a country as well. And therefore, making India intelligible to the global community, it's something which underlines the importance of soft power. Some of the best instances where Atalji used his soft power cards merits some reflections. Just after the nuclear tests, the US imposed economic sanctions against India. Not only this, but as many as 14 countries such as Japan, Germany, Australia, Canada, Sweden, Denmark suspended their bilateral aid program as a sanction against India and Pakistan. This period was a period of total isolation because global power put pressure on India, but India refused to surrender to the dictates of global powers and was determined to face the challenge in the form of sanctions. This led to a decline in net capital inflows. India was able to compensate for the initial loss of capital inflows through the sale of the so-called Resurgent India bonds to non-resident Indians. This bond issue brought in over $4 billion, and by October 1998, the total reserves exceeded the April 1998 level. I mean, he had the guts to face the challenge and also to overcome it, because he believed in the strength of the people, not only in India, but also the global community. The Indian diaspora played an important role in this, in a way, economic revitalization, and therefore, I believe Atal Bihari Vajpayee, what he had stated in 2001, the shape of our new world order will be determined by the success of pluralistic democratic societies in destroying the ideology of bigotry and hatred that drives terrorism. By highlighting the legacy of Mahatma Gandhi on Pravasi Bharatiya Divas, Vajpayee underscored India's philosophical heritage of non-violence and self-reliance, projecting soft power ideals as rooted in Gandhian values. प्रधानमंत्री जी की, मतलब अटल जी एक प्रधानमंत्री के रूप में जिस पद्धति से काम कर रहे थे और जिसके कारण हमारे देश की, जिसको हम सॉफ्ट पावर कहते हैं, कई लोगों को पावर इस शब्द के प्रति थोड़ा आक्षेप भी रहता है, मैं तो उसको सौम्य संपदा कहूँगा। ये भारत की सौम्य संपदा है, और ये जो सौम्य संपदा है, इसमें इजाफा हो, इसमें वृद्धि हो, इसमें पूरा विश्व समुदाय हमारी ओर आकर्षित हो, और सबसे महत्वपूर्ण है कि वो हमें ठीक तरीके से समझे। इसके लिए जो निरंतर प्रयास होते हैं, उसमें हमारे देश के जो अप्रवासी भारतीय है उनका भी योगदान महत्वपूर्ण होता है, और ऐसे अप्रवासी भारतीयों को चाहिए कि वो विदेश में भारत की एकता का, भारत की अखंडता का एक स्पष्ट संदेश विदेश के लोगों को देते जाए। कई बार ये दिखने को मिलता है कि हमारे ही अंदर का बिखराव विदेश की धरती पर भी बड़ा प्रोनाउंस्ड हो जाता है, और ऐसी स्थिति में मैं मानता हूँ कि भारत की जो हानि होती है और भारतीय जो भी हमारी सौम्य संपदा है उसकी जो हानि होती है, मैं मानता हूँ कि वो एक बहुत बड़ा चुनौती का विषय हमारे सम्मुख है। बिफोर आई क्लोज, लेट मी tell you what a Polish scholar, Patrick Kugel, in his book India's Soft Power, a new foreign policy strategy, published as late as in 2017, has observed very insightfully about Atal Bihari Vajpayee and his role in India's soft power promotion. His main argument, the writer's main argument, is that Atalji's government from 1998 to 2004 made soft power a core and central aspect of India's foreign policy, not just because of his deep Sangha-derived convictions about the greatness of Indian civilization and its universal appeal, but also due to strategic reasons after the nuclear test and to improve relations with the USA. According to the author, Atalji's legacy in institutionalizing soft power into Indian foreign policy was continued by his successors and was made even stronger under the present dispensation led by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. So it can well be argued that India's current soft power initiatives like Vaccine Maitri, Voice of the Global South, remember, this is a very, very new initiative, and one must commend all these efforts towards that, because as we see, the entire southern hemisphere has so many commonalities. In southern hemisphere, whether the countries in Latin America or in Africa or in Southeast Asia, generally have the same approach towards Mother Nature as against the approach of most of the Western countries or the developed countries. Not only that, family values or maybe appreciating the importance of our heritage, our traditions, all these things are common to the southern hemisphere. But unfortunately, as it happens, and many of you who are the students of geography must have come across what the Mercator maps are and what the other maps are, where they are projecting the entire global map also with a Eurocentric kind of mindset. So, Peter's projection, I'm sure many of you are aware of that. So, everywhere, I believe the shadow of colonialism has always been there. And as Prime Minister Narendra Modi has also appealed through his Pancha Prana that let us get rid of this shadow of colonialism. Let us free ourselves. Let us revisit our roots. Let us draw inspiration from our past to move to the future. And therefore, the Voice of Global South, Neighborhood First, Ramayana Trail, Buddhist Circuit, first responder during crisis and disasters, as we know, whether it is in Middle East or in any other country for that matter, India has been rushing to the rescue, and the developing countries are also asking Indian diplomats, जरा हमारे लोगों को भी बाहर निकालिए, भारतीय लोग तो निकल ही रहे हैं, थोड़ा हमारा भी काम करिए. As we know, during the Ukraine-Russia war, when Indian students were carried in buses with Indian tricolor flying atop, many other countries requested कि आपका झंडा थोड़े समय हमें भी दे दो ताकि हमारी भी बस निकल पाए. That is the stature acquired by India. Prime Minister Modi ji ने एक बार कहा कि this is not the time of war. And we see the resonance coming across. सारे लोग बोल रहे yes, yes, what PM Modi is saying is correct. This is not the era of war. ये हो रहा है. तो ये विश्व समुदाय की जो अपेक्षाएं हमसे बढ़ रही है, उसका कारण एक दृष्टि से है कि हमारी जो विश्व समुदाय के ओर देखने की दृष्टि है, जो अटल जी ने बहुत सही शब्दों में कहा कि फ्रेंडशिप विथ ऑल बट डोमिनेंस ऑफ नन. मैं मानता हूं कि अटल जी ने ये जो एक दृष्टि से नींव रची है, उसी के ऊपर हमारी सौम्य संपदा की एक इमारत आज बहुत अच्छे तरीके से खड़ी होती हमें दिखाई दे रही है. Many researchers believe that Vajpayee also must be credited for adroitly taking to our stride the situation arising out of the declaration of global war on terrorism by American President George W. Bush after 9/11. This, in a way, provided an opportunity for India to reframe the conflict in Jammu and Kashmir to India's advantage. West routinely looked at Kashmir as an issue of serious violation of human rights and repression of civil rights. Post 9/11, this has changed. India could change its label from oppressor of Kashmiri people to a credible ally in the war against terrorism. ये सारा परिवर्तन जिस पद्धति से हुआ है, विश्व का हमारी ओर देखने का दृष्टिकोण जिस पद्धति से बदला है, मैं मानता हूं कि अटल बिहारी वाजपेयी जी का योगदान इसमें अतुलनीय है। और इसलिए जब आज हम ये कहते हैं कि भारत की सौम्य संपदा और भारत के प्रति आकलन से, आफ्टर ऑल soft power is not just about attraction, just about goodwill, just about India being able to allure many people as tourists or maybe researchers as well. This real strength of India's soft power is in making the global community understand the core of the idea of India. And if they misinterpret it, I believe it is something for all of us to think about as to how do we explain the idea of India to the global community. There are many instances of crass misunderstandings. Some of them are politically motivated, some of them are because those in the academia or in the media don't know that they don't know. And therefore, we have to shake them from their bliss in the ignorance. And it is for us to be articulate. 20 years before, I had come across a beautiful article by Sushant Gunatilake, a Sri Lankan social scientist, where he has mentioned that in California, there was a seminar in the South California University, and the subject of the seminar was bride burning and son preference traditions in India. Can you imagine? This is happening. A couple of years back, I had the occasion of visiting Kyoto in Japan, where there is a wonderfully created ethnography museum. And in that museum, there is a huge South Asia gallery. In fact, it is all about India. Take out India and what remains of South Asia. It's a fact, without being jingoistic about it, it's a fact. But unfortunately, look at how India is being projected. In the gallery, when I was taking a round, I came across a signage where it is mentioned that India is the home of several ways of worship. Prominent among them are Hinduism and Brahmanism. What kind of interpretation of culture are you doing? And it is the failure of all of us, including the non-resident Indians making other foreign countries as their home, our media, our academia, our diplomats, everybody. We cannot, I believe, escape from the blame. और ये आज इसका स्मरण करना इसलिए जरूरी है क्योंकि अटल जी ने अपने कार्यकाल में इसी भूमिका से बहुत सारा काम एक विदेश मंत्री के नाते किया, प्रधानमंत्री के नाते किया और बीच काल में देश के एक प्रमुख राजनीतिक नेता और सांसद के नाते भी किया. Before I conclude, let me quote how Atal ji viewed India and what was the very passionate love for motherland which was synonymous with Atal Bihari Vajpayee. आज भारत अगर चाहे तो संसार में प्रथम पंक्ति का राष्ट्र बन सकता है. फिर मैं कहना चाहूंगा कि परकीय हमारे पैर नहीं खींच रहे, हम अपने ही पैरों में बेड़ियां डाले हैं. इन्हें तोड़ने का संकल्प हम करें. राष्ट्र को मिलन भूमि मानकर व्यक्ति से ऊपर उठकर जरूरत हो तो दल से ऊपर उठकर तेरा वैभव अमर रहे मां, हम दिन चार रहे न रहे, इस भाव से काम करें. व्यक्ति तो नहीं रहेगा. किसी ने मुझसे पूछा था, आपका सपना क्या है? मैंने कहा, एक महान भारत की रचना, यही मेरा सपना है. कहने लगे कि आपका सपना, क्या आपको भरोसा है कि आपके जीवन में पूरा होगा? मैंने कहा, नहीं होगा, लेकिन सपना पूरा करने के लिए फिर से इस देश में जन्म लेना पड़ेगा. तो मैं जन्म मरण के इस चक्र से छूटना चाहता हूं वैसे तो, मगर लेकिन अगर मेरे देश की हालत सुधरती नहीं है तो भारत का एक महान दिव्य भव्य राष्ट्र अगर मेरे आंखों सामने नहीं बनता, अगर हर व्यक्ति के लिए हम गरिमा की, स्वतंत्रता की गारंटी नहीं कर सकते, अगर विविधताओं को बनाए रखते हुए एकता की रक्षा नहीं कर सकते, तो मैं चाहूँगा कि दूसरा जन्म लेकर भी जूझने के लिए मैं तैयार हूँ। मैं आपको हृदय से धन्यवाद देता हूँ। परमात्मा मुझे शक्ति दे। आपने मुझे इस भाव को प्रकट कर अवसर दिया है। मैं मानता हूँ दैट वाज अटल बिहारी वाजपेयी। एंड देयरफॉर व्हेन वी टॉक अबाउट अटल बिहारी वाजपेयी एंड हिज कंट्रीब्यूशन इन द कॉन्टेक्स्ट ऑफ इंडिया सॉफ्ट पावर, this is the quintessential message that Atalji gives us. Before I conclude, let me share with you my own experience when I was dealing with some educationists in US. And many of them were Indians as well. हमारे महाराष्ट्र से गए हुए एक शिक्षक है वहाँ पर, और चूँकि यहाँ पर विद्या जी बैठी है तो शिक्षा क्षेत्र का उदाहरण मैं मानता हूँ कि हम सबके लिए अधिक रास आएगा। ये भारतीय शिक्षक हैं और वहाँ पर पढ़ा रहे थे। तो मैंने पूछा कि भारत के पाठशालाओं में पढ़ाना और अमेरिका में पढ़ाना, इसमें क्या अंतर है? तो उन्होंने कहा कि अंतर है, काफ़ी अंतर है। यहाँ कुछ अच्छी बातें हैं जो हमने भारत में ले जानी चाहिए, मगर भारत की भी बहुत सारी अच्छी बातें हैं जो यहाँ लानी चाहिए। तो उन्होंने एक प्रसंग मुझे बताया। उन्होंने कहा कि लगभग 15-16 साल के एक बच्चे को मैं पढ़ा रहा था, वो 10वीं कक्षा में था, और अच्छा होनहार बच्चा, US का 15 साल का, मेरे क्लास में दूसरे तीसरे पंक्ति में बैठने वाला, बहुत दिमागी, ब्रिलियंट। मगर एक बार मैंने देखा कि वो क्लास में बैठे बैठे झपकियाँ ले रहा है। तो मुझे ज़रा आश्चर्य हुआ, ये बच्चा ऐसा तो कभी करता नहीं। तो मैंने 1-2 दिन तो छोड़ दिया। तीसरे दिन मैंने जाकर उसको थोड़ा कंधे पे हाथ रखा तो वो उठ खड़ा हुआ, थोड़ा शर्म भी महसूस कर रहा था। चौथे 5वें दिन भी यही रहा। तो 6वें दिन मैंने थोड़ा और पास जाकर उसको कहा कि ज़रा खड़े रहो। वो खड़ा रहा, मगर इसके पहले कि मैं कुछ बोलूँ उसने कहा कि महोदय, सर, टीचिंग इज़ योर जॉब, वेदर टू लिसन टू योर लेक्चर और नॉट इज़ माई लिबर्टी। मतलब ये था कि लीव मी अलोन, अलाउ मी टू स्लीप, अलाउ मी टू टेक नैप। तो भारतीय शिक्षक को इस तरीके का जवाब सुनने की आदत तो है नहीं। तो वो बेचारा सहमा गया और वापस अपना अध्यापन शुरू किया। मगर उसके मन से ये विषय जा नहीं रहा था कि ये बच्चा सोता क्यों है। सुबह 11 बजे जब क्लास शुरू हुआ है तो पहले लेक्चर में ये सोने लगा, और 1 नहीं 2 दिन नहीं, सारा सप्ताह भर ऐसा ही चलता रहा। तो ही वॉन्टेड टू प्रोब इन टू इट एज टू वॉट इज द प्रॉब्लम विद दिस किड, बट द चाइल्ड वॉज अनयील्डिंग। उसने कुछ उनको बताया भी नहीं, कुछ बोलने के लिए भी तैयार नहीं था। बट इवेंचुअली भारतीय शिक्षक अपनी जीवटता के लिए भी मशहूर है, तो उसने उसका पीछा छोड़ा नहीं। आखिरकार बच्चे ने कहा ओके फाइन, वी विल हैव ए कप ऑफ टी। तो चाय पीते पीते बच्चे ने कहा कि सर, आई नो यू आर क्यूरियस टू नो एज टू व्हाई आई एम स्लीपिंग, व्हाई आई एम डोजिंग ऑफ इन द क्लासरूम, दैट टू इन द मॉर्निंग एट 11 o'clock, बट लेट मी टेल यू दैट देयर इज अ प्रॉब्लम इन माई फैमिली। माई मदर हैज नाउ ब्रॉट ए न्यू फादर फॉर मी। अभी ये जो मेरे नए पिता है वो ये नहीं चाहते कि मैं इस घर में रहूं, इसलिए हर रोज हमारा झगड़ा हो रहा है। मुझे वो बोलते हैं कि जाओ कहीं हॉस्टल में रहो, कुछ करो, बट मूव अवे। अभी मैं कैसे जाऊं, कहाँ जाऊं? मगर मैं तंग आ गया हर रोज के झगड़े को। फिर मैंने उनको 8 दिन पहले बोला कि ओके फाइन, आई विल अलाउ मी टू वर्क समवेयर फॉर 6 months, आई विल हैव सम मनी एंड देन आई विल मूव अवे। तो अभी पैसा कहाँ से आएगा? तो मैं एक मैकडोनल्ड के शॉप में काम करता हूँ, रात्रि 10 बजे से सुबह 3 बजे तक। घर आता हूँ 4 बजे, सो जाता हूँ। मगर जब 9 बजे उठकर तैयार होकर क्लास में आता हूँ तो इट इज़ ह्यूमनली इम्पॉसिबल फॉर मी टू रिमेन अवेक, और इसलिए मैं झपकियाँ लेता हूँ, इसलिए मुझे नींद आती है। मगर अंत में उस छात्र ने कहा कि सर, आप भारतीय है, इसलिए मेरी समस्या के तह तक जाने की आपने कोशिश की। किसी अमेरिकन शिक्षक ने ये काम नहीं किया है। ये भारत है, ये भारत की गुरु शिष्य परंपरा है, ये भारत की सौम्य संपदा है। आइए अटल जी के प्रति सम्मान की भावना रखते हुए, उनको श्रद्धांजलि देते हुए, इस सौम्य संपदा में हम अपना योगदान कैसे दे सकते हैं, इस पर भी हम जरूर चिंतन करें। धन्यवाद।
Thank you, Dr. Sahasrabuddhe, for articulating the late PM's contribution to building India's soft power. So the floor is now open for questions. Just one ground rule: or rather two, keep the questions short so that more people can ask the questions, and wait for the mic to come to you. Thank you. It's the person in a sweater. Yes.
Namaste, sir. Inspiring speech. I myself am a student at Symbiosis, currently pursuing a BCom. I think one of the things that I've personally noticed while studying here is that there's an appalling lack of appreciation for Indian culture. Right, I myself am an evidence of this by wearing a suit. My question is, being a part of the generation that is famously unaware of what's happening in the environment, how do I, as a part of this generation, work towards creating better awareness of both Indian culture and other events, not just political, but also economic? And how do we keep people interested so that later on we don't end up in a future where there's a generation that has absolutely no awareness of decisions?
Thank you. Hello. Am I audible? Yeah. It's a good question, and I'm happy that this question came from you, representing the younger generation, the Gen Z or whatever, I don't know. But whatever it is, point is that we have to, first of all, understand that we are Indians and we have to remain Indians. Then only global community will recognize us in a different manner. If we try to become Western, if we try to ape everything that is coming from abroad, then our Indianness will certainly evaporate. And there are several things which, unfortunately, not just the kind of dresses we use or the kind of songs we sing or whatever it is. हमारे एक सांसद मित्र है, वो कह रहे थे कि वो कर्नाटक में एक देहात में गए तो देहात का एक बूढ़ा अपने बच्चे के साथ, पोते के साथ कुछ झगड़ रहा था. तो उन्होंने पूछा कि आपको क्या झगड़ा क्यों कर रहे हो? वो अच्छा अभी अभी स्कूल से आया, आपका पोता है. तो उन्होंने कहा मैं क्या बताऊं आपको, अभी अगस्त महीना चल रहा है, इतनी धूप है, बारिश का नाम नहीं, एक बूंद तक गिरा नहीं है, और ये बच्चा हर रोज आकर घर में मुझे कविता सुनाता है, रेन रेन गो अवे, रेन रेन गो अवे. ये क्या चल रहा है? दिस इज अ सिंबॉलिक एग्जाम्पल. इवन देयर वॉज वन वेरी वेल नोन agriculturist here, Vilas Rao Salunkhe. He had once told me that apple a day keeps the doctor away. We have blindly borrowed this from elsewhere. This is not true in Pune or Mumbai, where apples do not grow. If you eat apple a day, doctor may visit every day. So let us not buy everything blindly which is coming from other countries, especially the Western countries. So let us preserve our Indianness in every possible way. And while doing so, the other part of your question, how do we also kind of augment, how do we also build bridges? And there are several other things also which we should be borrowing from the Western countries. No doubt about it. But as Mahatma Gandhi had once famously said, that I will borrow from the West, but only when I am able to, or I have the confidence of returning it with decent interest. That ability we have. So no question of, we are not at quarrel with the Western countries, but we have enough treasure with us. Let us have a look at that and then do it. For example, in India, we have a particular value system where we appreciate the importance of values like, let's say, for example, integrity, honesty, perseverance, all these things we value. In the Western culture, there are other values also which they attach great importance, like presentation, like management, like result orientation, like productivity. But then, everything about productivity, result orientation, but nothing about integrity and honesty is a big zero. At the same time, simply being a person very honest and a man of integrity and somebody who is ready to burn the midnight oil and take all pains and everything is not going to take us anywhere unless we match our value system with the upcoming post-industrial revolution value system, which you may call as Western or American value system. So, there has to be again confluence of value systems as well.
Any more questions?
Sir, मेरा नाम आशुतोष है. If you don't mind, I want to make an observation. आपने बात की सॉफ्ट पावर की. मेरे नाना जी गुरुकुल वृंदावन के प्राचार्य रहे हैं. उन्होंने ग्रंथ लिखा था भारत के प्राणाचार्य. उसमें भारतीयता के बारे में काफ़ी लंबा लेख था. एक शब्द इस्तेमाल किया उन्होंने और शायद भलमानसता. काफ़ी सोचा मैंने इसके बारे में और अपनी ज़िंदगी में 2 दफ़ा एक्सपीरियंस किया इसको बम्बई में रहते हुए, जहाँ की लोग जाना जाते हैं कि भाई नेबर को नहीं जानता है, कमर्शियल होते हैं लोग. 1984 में एक बड़ी ज़ोरदार बारिश हुई थी. सारे बम्बई की रेल यात्रा ख़त्म हो गई थी. लोग चल के घर जा रहे थे नारीमन पॉइंट से और बांद्रा और आगे बोरीवली तक. रास्ते भर में लाइन लगी हुई थी. लोग चाय लेके, बिस्किट लेके, ब्लैंकेट लेके खड़े हुए थे कि भाई घर जा रहा है, कुछ खा ले. दोबारा ये बात 2007 में हुई, जबकि 350 सेंटीमीटर पानी गिरा था सिर्फ बम्बई के सबर्ब्स में. मतलब इतना डूब गया था कि 2nd फ्लोर तक भी पानी भर गया था. दोबारा यही हुआ. इतने सालों के बाद बच्चों को लोगों ने अपने घर में रखा, फ़ोन दिया कि भाई पेरेंट्स को बता दो कि तुम कहाँ हो. स्कूलों में जो बच्चे फंस गए थे वहाँ खाना भेजा गया नेबर एरिया में. 2007 में अगस्त महीने में एक कैटरीना करके हरिकेन आया था इन न्यू ऑरलीन्स. उसके बारे में पढ़ा तो इतनी हैरानी हुई कि एक तरफ बम्बई, जहाँ लोग दिल खोल के बच्चों को घर में बुला के सामान दे के हेल्प कर रहे थे, कैटरीना में क्या हुआ? It was completely ransacked as a city as a result of the hurricane. लोगों ने इतनी लूटपाट की. तो ये कहाँ से आता है? Is this soft power? Is this the origin of our soft power?
Yes, of course. ये हमारे देश का एक स्वभाव है. हमारे यहाँ जैसे अभी एक गुड नेबरलीनेस वगैरह की चर्चा मैंने अपने भाषण में की. हमारे यहाँ तो मराठी में हम जिसको शेजार धर्म कहते हैं, ये हैं पड़ोसियों के प्रति भी हमारा कुछ दायित्व होता है. और अटल जी ने बहुत फेमसली कहा था कि वी कैन नॉट चेंज अवर नेबर्स. वो तो है ही. तो ये है. तो इसलिए हर ऐसे पीड़ित, शोषित, वंचित व्यक्ति के प्रति जो हमारा अंत्योदय का सिद्धांत है, वो तो हमेशा रहा है और ये हमारे समाज जीवन का अभिन्न अंग है. कई देहातों में, आपने तो क्राइसिस की बात की, मगर क्राइसिस हो न हो, कई देहातों में आज भी जो बुजुर्ग व्यक्ति है वो अपना खाना खाने के पहले घर के बाहर जाते हैं, चिड़ियों के लिए, चींटियों के लिए कुछ वहाँ पर छोटा बड़ा खाना रखते हैं, सूर्यदेव को प्रणाम करते हैं और बाद में अन्न ग्रहण करते हैं. तो ये हमारी परंपरा है, नॉट जस्ट टुवर्ड्स deprived sections of the society or people in crisis, but towards all for that matter.
We seem to have no more questions. As we bring this lecture series to a close, I apologize. Please raise your hands higher.
I promise I'll keep it crisp. Sir, it is a known fact that the soft power calculus is integral, indivisible part is good governance. And when it comes to Shraddha Atal Bihari Ji, he is looked up as the talisman of good governance. So as a student of public policy and governance yourself, could you please share any experience that you really enjoyed of especially fundamentals of good governance that this particular government has carried forward? Thank you.
अच्छी बात है. मतलब हमारे देश में जिस पद्धति से सरकारें चलती आई, तो वो तो ऐसा था कि जो पहले हो रहा है उसी को आगे बढ़ाना है. मगर परिवर्तन तब होता है when you try to think about it and add some value. In our country, till 1998, there was a Department of Good Governance, Department of Social Welfare, as they call. Atalji changed the nomenclature and he made it a Social Justice Department. That is his approach. Till his time, there was no department, separate department for tribal affairs. Now there is a department for tribal affairs. So taking care of all the deprived, disadvantaged sections of the society was his contribution. Again, when I talked about colonialism, Ranade and all the economists over here are conscious of the fact that till 1999, we used to have the presentation of budget on the 28th of February at 4 o'clock in the evening. अभी संसद में जो भी जाते हैं उनको पता है कि संसद में जो महत्वपूर्ण कार्य है वो कार्य सूची में पहले आते हैं, बजट के अलावा दूसरा कुछ महत्वपूर्ण है नहीं, बावजूद इसकी वो शाम को 4 बजे आता था। क्यों आता था? क्योंकि साहब वहां उठकर जब अपनी कचहरी में जाता था ब्रिटिश, तो उनकी सुविधा से प्री इंडिपेंडेंस इरा से ये चलता आया, किसी के मन में भी आया नहीं कि इसको बदला जाए। इट वॉज अटल जी हु चेंज द टाइमिंग फ्रॉम 4 o'clock to 11 o'clock in the morning. इट वॉज नॉट रॉकेट साइंस, मगर अप्रोच नहीं था। और आज अभी देखिए प्राइम मिनिस्टर मोदी हैज मूव्ड फर्दर फॉरवर्ड, और आज हम 28 फरवरी की जगह 1 फरवरी को बजट लाते हैं। उसका कारण यह है कि 1 फरवरी का बजट जब आता है तो 15 मार्च और एट द मोस्ट 20 मार्च तक उसको संसद की मंजूरी मिल जाती है। तो पूरे आर्थिक वर्ष में, यानी जो 1 अप्रैल से शुरू होता है, उसका विनियोग हो सकता है। जब 28 फरवरी को आता था तो उसको मंजूर होने में ही 15 मई का दिन आता था, तो उसके ऊपर जो कार्रवाई होती थी वो 1 जुलाई से होती थी। तो पहला जो क्वार्टर है ऑफ द फाइनेंशियल ईयर गेट्स लॉस्ट। आज वो नहीं हो रहा। ये भी एक लीगसी है एक दृष्टि से, और बड़े बड़े नेताओं का लीगसी का ये विषय अपनी सोच के आधार पर चलता ही है। लाल बहादुर शास्त्री जी ने कहा जय जवान जय किसान, अटल जी ने जोड़ा जय जवान जय किसान जय विज्ञान, मोदी जी ने जोड़ा जय किसान जय जवान जय किसान जय विज्ञान जय अनुसंधान। दिस इज व्हाट इज लीगसी।
Any more questions? Thank you so much, Dr. Sahasrabuddhe. I now invite Dr. Mishelkar to deliver the closing remarks as we bring this lecture series to a close.
Vinay ji, Saumya Sampada, such a beautiful word, gets a different meaning to soft power, very frankly. Thank you very much for such a scholarly, such an inspiring lecture. And it is with this lecture that we close this series. All good things have to come to an end, as they say. And so is the case now. I'll make some brief remarks. As usual, great ideas in PIC come from one man. And normally I get a call late night, Ramesh, I was just thinking. And then the idea actually hit it out. Dr. Yeravdekar. It was his idea to think about celebration of the life of work of such a great icon, a Yuga Purush, that is what I would call him basically, not anything less than that. So I had a series of 5 lectures, just to remind you, because some of you may not have been there in all lectures. I think the first one was there by Kumar Ketkar, an eminent journalist and former Rajya Sabha MP. And if you remember, he focused on Vajpayee's commitment to pluralism and his approach valuing dissent and engaging with the opposition, exemplified by his dedication to inclusivity and democratic integrity, and setting really a remarkable example for future leaders. The second one was by Ambassador Sudhir Devre and Madhav Mangalmurthy, and this was about foreign policy legacy. And they discussed and highlighted Atalji's strategic diplomacy, especially his response to the 1998 nuclear test, which was a bold move which showcased his resolve to strengthen India's security while also ensuring diplomatic stability. Atalji's vision to foster goodwill abroad helped elevate India's stature on a global stage a legacy that continues to benefit us today. That was the second. The third one was by Dr. Vijay Kelkar and Dr. Ajit Ranade, the conversation between the two. And this was on economic reforms, extraordinarily insightful discussion, I would say. And Dr. Kelkar spoke about the transformation brought about by reducing tariffs, restructuring trade, which opened up Indian markets to the world. Vajpayee's, Atalji's reforms in power and transportation, and they significantly boosted productivity and set the foundation of India's economic growth, etc. But one thing that I remember was discuss, discuss, and discuss. All right, and I still remember your remarks on looking at some of the today's crises and how Atalji would have handled them, basically, because he would get everyone together, basically, and move sort of forward. The fourth one was Sudhindra Kulkarni. I remember he had notes like you have of some 20-25 pages, and he spoke for 80 minutes. I remember this was the longest. And he has worked very closely with Atalji. So there was a lot of outpouring of emotions and great insights. And actually it was a unique perspective for us about his approach to governance, about his approach to policy, his sensitivity towards addressing social challenges, fostering unity in diversity, and so on. A fascinating lecture. And now, yours. I would not like to summarize what you said, excepting to repeat those words which has touched my heart. Saumya Sampada. That's it. That was his sort of legacy. So thank you very much. I think you can see that the kind of topics that were covered, policies, diplomacy, economics, politics, culture promotion, etc. And his legacy transcends any single field, touching the lives of millions and shaping India's path to becoming a robust and inclusive nation. So the purpose, Vijay, with which you started this has been served. I think it is absolutely remarkable. Fortunately, all these lectures are available on YouTube fully, by the way. So this will remain with us as sort of a great treasure. There was something that was planned which we are not doing, and that had to do with science, basically. And the reason we did was I discussed with Vijay that 5 is a good number, basically, to stop. And we had covered practically sort of everything that we wanted. But a couple of my reflections, because when he was the Prime Minister, I was the Director General of CSIR and Secretary, Department of Scientific Industrial Research. And what I found, and he was the President of the CSIR Society. So every year I had to make a presentation to him with the Finance Minister, Minister of Industry, and so on and so forth. So there are 2-3 things I will just quickly sort of mention. The first was, you will recollect that in the last talk that Sudhindra Kulkarni gave, he made a special mention of the fact that I suggested 11 May as the Technology Day, that it should be the Technology Day, and Atalji accepted it and declared it. But there is a story behind it, the way it happened. He said what happened, but how it happened is even more interesting. So 11 May was a very interesting day, and we had the CSIR Directors Conference in Bangalore, and India's first indigenous small aircraft was launched on that day. That was built by National Aerospace Laboratory, and Dr. Murli Manoj Joshi actually did that. And this event happened around 11 o'clock. And then around 2 o'clock, we got the news that the Trishul missile was tested by DRDO. And in the evening, we were having a directors' conference, and suddenly a note came to Dr. Mulimala Joshi ji, which informed him about Pokhran 2, that had happened. And he read it and announced it, and then there was nobody in the mood to continue the conversation, so everybody jumped. And we concluded, and then I remember Mulimala Joshi ji and myself watching the television and seeing what are the reactions, because immediate reactions started coming up. And at that time I suggested to Dr. Mulimala Joshi that there are 3 events today. And like on 28th February we have Science Day, we can call it a Technology Day. And he agreed. But later on the action was interesting. The action was that we were giving away the Bhatnagar prizes. In National Physical Laboratory we had this ceremony, and the awards were given at Atalji's hands. And I remember Atalji was here, Dr. Mulimala Joshi on this side, and I was on this side. And in a small interlude, I just mentioned all this to him. And I said, it would be great if we declare it as a Technology Day. He didn't show any reaction. Then he actually went and he had a written speech which he read out. So I thought it's the end of it. Nothing is going to happen. So he kept it and then made a reference to these 3 tests. And he says, I declare 11 May as Technology Day. Now the interesting part was that it was a spontaneity. Because for declaring anything as a national day, you know the process that is required. So it came from him. The other thing I remember about him, once again the spontaneity, I'm just focusing on the spontaneity part, was the following, that in 2003, we celebrated 60 years of CSR, Diamond Jubilee. And in Vigyan Bhavan there was a program. And I remember we had an internal discussion, how do we celebrate 60 years? So somebody said, put 60 technologies that we have developed on a single page, and so on and so forth. So I said, no, let's do like this. Election Inc. is NPL, National Physical Laboratory. And on the election day, everyone had that CSR technology on their finger. So what we did was that we took a blank page, basically, and nothing but just the finger. And on that finger, the election Inc. And CSR technology on the finger of every Indian, something like that. Because people had to, actually while turning pages, they had to see what is this, and so on and so forth. And Sujin Kulkarni tells me that that morning he was sitting with Atalji, and Atalji was turning the pages and he saw this, Are kya hai? And then Sudhin explained to him the significance. And I remember in his Vigyan Bhavan speech, he kept his speech away and talked about technology and democracy. It is one of the greatest speeches I have heard. It came from sort of. I'm just giving these sort of 2 instances. It was very spontaneous. I must say I was very lucky. I enjoyed his trust to an unbelievable extent. As you probably know, there have been 16 Mashalkar committees. The very first one was regional engineering colleges to NITs. That was done at his time, that Mashalkar committee. But interestingly, I also remember that in 2003, there was this issue of pollution in Delhi, all right? And it is amazing. In 2003, it was there, and today also we are talking about pollution in Delhi anyway. But that time, the focus was on the pollution created by autos, the car, trucks, and so on and so forth. So Supreme Court had come down and hammered the Indian government in a way, and there was a kind of an emergency situation where they had given certain orders. And Atalji was chairing the meeting, and Mr. Ram Naik was the Petroleum and Natural Gas Minister. He was actually making a presentation. And I'm told by the Petroleum Natural Gas Secretary at that time that Atalji stopped him after a few minutes and said, "ऐसा करिए, एक मशलकर कमेटी बना दीजिए, सब हल हो जाए." I have no words to say how grateful one is, because at the end of it, I always say India's challenge is not budget deficit, it is trust deficit. It is that kind of a trust which helped us do whatever we did at that point in time. That's all that I would say. I can go on for 1 hour, but I thought I will just mention these three. So Vijay, I've also done the science talk now. So there's a tick mark in your sort of diary. So thank you once again. I think the insights shared in all these 5 lectures have been absolutely phenomenal, and that's the only way we could have played our tribute to this Yuga Purush. Thank you very much.
I now request Dr. Mashelkar and Dr. Kelkar to felicitate Dr. Sahasrabuddhe. So that brings us to the end of the lecture. Just stay a few minutes for my vote of thanks, I guess. On behalf of Pune International Centre, I extend my warmest gratitude to each of you for honouring us with your presence and making this occasion truly memorable. I would like to convey our heartfelt thanks to Dr. Sahasrabuddhe and Dr. Yeravdekar for graciously accepting our invitation and for leading such an enlightening discussion on the late Prime Minister's invaluable contributions to India's soft power. Your profound insights have enriched our understanding of Mr. Vajpayee's foreign policy initiatives and the nuanced impact of his vision on India's global standing. Thank you to the audience for asking such interesting questions, and I hope you will always bring this rigor to each of our discussions. Finally, I extend my sincere thanks to the dedicated PIC staff whose meticulous efforts behind the scenes ensured the seamless execution of this event. At the end, I would just like to remind you of the next events that PIC is going to host. The first one is on the 17th of November. That is the National Conference of Social Innovation. Please do visit us at Yashda to attend the event. And the next important event would be on 25th November. That is the Dilip Patgaonkar Memorial Lecture, which will be delivered by Ms. Neerja Chaudhary. On the same day, we'll also be releasing a PIC publication titled Nari Shakti. So please do visit our website to understand the details a bit more, Thank you once again.